Harley-Davidson sold the twin cam as bulletproof power, but engineers knew it wasn't. Oil leaks, failing tensioners, and cooked gaskets weren't accidents. They were the cost of rushed design. Riders trusted the brand. Harley buried the warnings. If you own a twin cam, your breakdown wasn't bad luck. It was inevitable. Stick around, because I'll show you the years hit hardest, the fixes that actually work, and how Harley's cover-up almost collapsed their entire reputation. Power that failed. Factories aren't supposed to keep secrets, but this one did. Buried inside Giga, Texas, was a wing erased from blueprints, a hallway nobody was cleared to enter. And the first man to stumble across it swore the walls were alive with heat. He wasn't a spy or whistleblower, just a contractor sent to solve a routine airflow issue. His tools picked up vibrations that didn't belong, guiding him down a dim corridor that wasn't part of any safety briefing. The deeper he walked, the louder the hum became, until he reached a sealed metal door. His badge refused to scan. The schematics on his tablet showed nothing. To official records, the hallway didn't exist, but light bled from the threshold, glowing faintly against the concrete, and the door radiated unnatural warmth. Machines don't lie, he thought. Something inside was alive. When he radioed for guidance, a supervisor cut him off. That wing is sealed. It's not active. You're not cleared. Days later, he was reassigned with no explanation. His service logs were quietly scrubbed, yet rumors spread. Other contractors whispered about unmarked crates moved at night, deliveries without barcodes or invoices, guarded by staff with badges that didn't scan in the company's own system. The man couldn't prove what he felt, but the hum followed him long after he left. Because doors like that don't guard storage, they guard secrets, and some secrets burn. The buried memo. Executives did not panic when the first reports crossed their desks. They calculated. A memo flagged vibration anomalies, unexplained energy draws, and safety concerns. It could have triggered an internal review, but leadership weighed reputation against responsibility. Protect the brand, protect quarterly earnings, admit nothing. That became the unspoken law. Boardroom meetings grew tense. Engineers presented diagrams, warning of catastrophic failure if the system was ever engaged. One director leaned back, shrugged, and asked what disclosure might cost in market value. Another cautioned that shareholder trust mattered more than technician paranoia. The memo was filed into a restricted archive. Only a handful of eyes ever saw it again. Inside the company, silence was incentivized. Staff who pressed questions found themselves sidelined, reassigned, or quietly excluded from major projects. Careers were preserved through obedience, not candor. And with every passing quarter, the myth of progress expanded. Tesla positioned itself as untouchable, a pioneer no regulator could slow down. But the buried memo did not die. It haunted conversations at lunch tables, surfaced in whispers at contractor bars, and traveled as rumor through electrician crews. A warning unheeded grows louder, not quieter. And this one was about to scream, because machines cannot keep secrets. When power courses through hidden circuits, it always finds a way to reveal itself. If you're already shocked by how deep Harley's denial goes, hit that like button to push this story further. And drop a comment. Tell me if you think riders deserved better, or if Harley's excuses still hold weight. A recall gone wrong. The fix was supposed to be simple. Inspect the faulty assembly, swap the part, reassure everyone that safety was intact. That was the script Tesla handed to its contractors. But when the recall went live, things unraveled fast. Instead of solving the failure, the replacement kits triggered new problems. Technicians noticed pressure spikes that had not existed before. Adjusted valves cracked under stress, and heat signatures climbed past thresholds. The remedy only shifted the weakness to another corner of the machine. In one case, a repaired unit shorted an entire panel within 48 hours, forcing an emergency shutdown of the wing. Owners of data logs saw the pattern. Energy consumption climbing, stabilizing briefly, then surging again with greater intensity. It looked less like repair and more like adaptation, as if the machine had learned how to redirect strain. Tesla issued polished statements, dismissing it as isolated incidents, but those on the floor knew better. Every recall carries a message. We've identified the danger, and now it's safe again. This one carried the opposite lesson. Fixes did not close the wound, they deepened it. And in the garages and test loops where prototypes still ran, people began asking a darker question. What if the machine wasn't broken at all? What if this was exactly how it was designed to behave? Every ride starts with the right gear. Links for my go-to accessories are in the description. Dreams betrayed. The first real casualties of the twin cam's design flaws were not corporate reputations or quarterly reports. They were riders. Stories began to circulate of sudden tire blowouts, engines seizing mid-ride, and near collisions caused by failures that no Harley loyalist expected. One rider in Texas described how his rear wheel locked up without warning on the freeway, forcing him to swerve into the shoulder at 60 miles per hour. Another in Michigan recalled the terror of losing control when his shock adjuster failed, describing it as, like the bike decided to betray me. These were not isolated anecdotes. Across the country, forums filled with complaints, photos of oil pooling under brand new bikes, and angry posts demanding accountability. The myth of indestructible Harley reliability was cracking, replaced by fear and suspicion. Riders who had trusted the brand for decades now questioned whether they could take their families on road trips without risking disaster. For Harley-Davidson, the danger was no longer confined to engines. It was spreading into the culture of loyalty that had sustained the company for over a century. Once that bond breaks, repairs are not made with wrenches or warranties. They require trust, and trust once lost is nearly impossible to rebuild. The outrage of riders was only the beginning. What started in garages and roadside breakdowns was about to explode into something far bigger. Engines that leaked. Beneath polished chrome and sleek casings, the engine told a different story. Oil bled where it should have cycled clean. Gaskets that were designed to hold pressure began failing far too soon, leaving stains on garage floors and smoke on open highways. The scavenge pump, meant to keep circulation balanced, lagged behind demand. Instead of cooling, it cooked. Riders blamed themselves. Bad maintenance, harsh rides, unlucky parts. But the truth was deeper. The flaws were structural, woven into the very DNA of the twin-cam design. Inside design rooms, drafts showed how deadlines trimmed safety margins. Tolerances that once carried redundancy were cut closer, betting that most engines would survive the average lifespan before owners noticed. It was a gamble masked as engineering. The gamble failed. Independent mechanics noticed first. They replaced seal after seal, watching fresh leaks appear in weeks. They upgraded pumps, only to hear new complaints from the same customers. Every attempt to patch exposed another weakness. The problem was not a single defect. It was an ecosystem of compromises stacked together. Harley-Davidson marketed the twin cam as a revolution. In reality, it was a rush job disguised as heritage. And while brochures promised strength, the engines whispered the opposite with every drip of oil. Inside boardrooms, leaders argued whether those whispers should ever reach the public. Delays and denials. Inside Harley's headquarters, the debate turned poisonous. Engineers pushed for redesigns, presenting data that showed failures were not anomalies, but patterns. Executives countered with spreadsheets of sales growth, arguing that a pause to admit flaws could collapse momentum. The truth was clear, but acknowledgement threatened the bottom line. Meetings dragged into late nights, punctuated by arguments that ended with silence. Pride fueled decisions as much as profit. To admit weakness in the twin cam meant admitting Harley had gambled wrong on its most important release in decades. For managers who had staked reputations on its success, denial was easier. Delays became the default solution. Every postponed decision gave time for another quarter of revenue, another set of reassuring press releases, another chance to pretend problems were isolated. Meanwhile, dealerships wrestled with angry customers, and riders racked up repair bills that never should have existed. The longer executives stalled, the higher the cost of fixing the engine became. Harley didn't just fail to act, they doubled down. Instead of halting production, the company pushed harder, insisting the twin cam represented strength, not weakness. That gamble inflamed the scandal further, locking the brand into denial. And while leaders congratulated themselves for controlling the message, the fallout was already hitting dealers who no longer had the parts to keep customers satisfied. Parts vanish. The ripple effect of Harley's denial soon hit the dealer network. Replacement kits for faulty components became scarce, leaving mechanics to explain to angry customers why their bikes sat idle for weeks or months. Shock adjusters, gasket sets, and upgraded pumps were either back-ordered or rationed. Dealers whispered that parts were being redirected to priority markets while small-town shops were left stranded. For riders, the experience was infuriating. They had paid premium prices for iconic machines, yet they now faced the humiliation of waiting months for simple fixes. Some dealers admitted privately that they were under orders not to discuss the root causes of shortages. Instead, they were told to promise that parts would arrive soon, even when supply chain logs suggested otherwise. Mechanics found themselves caught between loyalty to the brand and frustration at its failures. They were the face of Harley to riders, forced to absorb the anger that should have been directed at corporate offices. Over time, resentment spread through the dealer network. Shops that once proudly carried Harley banners began questioning whether the company still valued them as partners. But if corporate silence angered dealers, it enraged riders even more. And the Harley community, once loyal to the core, was no longer content to grumble quietly. Riders revolt. By the time riders realized the truth, patience had run out. Forums filled with angry posts documenting blown gaskets, seized engines, and repair bills that rivaled monthly mortgage payments. Photos of oil-soaked driveways spread across social media, tagged with captions that cut straight through Harley's polished marketing. Loyalty was cracking. Clubs that once rallied around the brand began staging protests. In some towns, owners parked their broken bikes outside dealerships with hand-painted signs calling Harley a liar. Petitions demanding recalls and full accountability gathered thousands of signatures. For a company that had built its empire on community pride, the backlash felt like betrayal made visible. Younger riders, already skeptical of Harley's aging image, amplified the outrage online. Viral videos mocked the twin scam, a phrase that stung worse than any lawsuit. Dealers who once hosted barbecues and charity rides now faced crowds chanting for answers. The crisis wasn't confined to garages anymore, it was out in the streets. What began as oil leaks and quiet whispers had become a cultural revolt. The myth of indestructibility was gone, replaced by fury. Riders weren't just asking for fixes, they were demanding justice. And as the community raised its voice louder than ever, lawyers started circling, preparing to drag Harley into a battle no marketing slogan could silence. Into the courts. The first lawsuit landed like a thunderclap. A group of riders filed a class action, accusing Harley-Davidson of knowingly selling defective twin-cam engines and covering up the damage. Court filings described oil leaks, engine seizures, and near accidents as evidence of corporate negligence. Suddenly, what Harley dismissed as complaints became sworn testimony. Legal teams lined up. Consumer rights attorneys framed the case as betrayal, while Harley's lawyers countered with motions to dismiss and attempts to force arbitration. But the tide was against them. Judges saw enough credible evidence to let the lawsuits proceed. Each new filing brought the possibility of depositions, discovery, and exposure Harley could not spin away. Estimates of liability ballooned. Analysts suggested potential damages in the hundreds of millions, depending on how many owners joined the suits. More worrying for Harley was precedent. If one court ruled the company misled consumers, it would open the door to a wave of copycat cases across states. For decades, Harley had fought battles on the open road, competing in sales and culture. Now the war had shifted into courtrooms lined with lawyers, clerks, and endless paperwork. And just as the company braced for trial, dealers began facing a new wave of pressure, this time directly from Harley itself: silenced dealers. Dealerships had always been Harley's lifeline, the link between the factory and the faithful. But as the twin-cam crisis deepened, that relationship soured. Corporate memos instructed dealers to downplay engine complaints, avoid written acknowledgments, and push customers toward extended warranties instead of repairs. Silence was no longer optional, it was enforced. Some dealers resisted, worried about losing longtime clients. They were met with gag orders tucked inside updated franchise agreements: speak too openly and risk losing supply allocations. Challenge the narrative, and corporate auditors would show up unannounced. The message was clear: survival required obedience. Behind counters, mechanics swallowed frustration. They patched bikes with dwindling parts, fielded angry calls, and watched loyal riders walk away. Many wanted to tell the truth, that the engines had systemic flaws, but feared retaliation. A culture of secrecy stretched from Milwaukee's boardrooms all the way to small-town showrooms. The silence carried a cost. Customers left dealerships not just with broken bikes, but with broken trust. Conversations that once centered on weekend rallies now revolved around betrayal. Every muffled answer pushed riders further from the brand. And as dealers struggled to keep faith alive, the problem shifted from local shops to something larger. Harley's brand itself, once untouchable, was now bleeding in plain view. You've seen how far this scandal has spiraled, and we're only scratching the surface. If you want every twist, every leak, and every hidden truth, make sure you subscribe right now, because the biggest revelations are still coming. Brand collapse. For more than a century, Harley-Davidson represented the idea of the open road, of rebellion packaged in chrome and steel. Owning a Harley was not just about horsepower, it was about identity. That image proved more valuable than any quarterly earnings report. But the twin-cam scandal cut to the heart of that identity. When riders discovered that their beloved machines were flawed, and worse, that the company may have hidden those flaws, the brand mythology cracked. Consumer trust is not measured in torque or warranty coverage. It is measured in belief. Once belief falters, even the loudest exhaust note cannot drown out doubt. Marketing campaigns promising durability sounded hollow when garages across America were littered with oil stains. This collapse was not just about machines breaking down. It was about a cultural betrayal. For riders who had tattooed Harley logos on their arms, who had passed down bikes through generations, the scandal felt personal. Repairing a gasket is easy. Repairing trust is not. Marketing executives scrambled to salvage the image with glossy ads emphasizing freedom, tradition, and craftsmanship. Yet those messages often backfired. Riders saw the campaigns as hollow, even insulting, given the reality of constant breakdowns. The more Harley leaned on nostalgia, the more obvious the gap became between promise and experience. And as riders turned skeptical and clubs voiced anger, Wall Street began to notice. Investors, unlike fans, are not sentimental. They follow numbers, and the numbers were starting to paint a grim picture. Wall Street wakes. For years, investors treated Harley-Davidson stock as a stable bet. The company had heritage, global recognition, and a loyal customer base that seemed unshakable. But financial markets are not immune to scandal. Analysts began issuing downgrades, citing both the cost of lawsuits and the erosion of brand equity. Shares wobbled as reports of legal exposure and community backlash spread. Investment firms warned clients that Harley could face a long-term reputational discount. That meant the company's value would remain depressed even if it managed to pay fines and issue recalls. Trust, once lost, tends to linger in balance sheets for years. The risk was not just about immediate payouts. It was about whether future generations of riders would still see Harley as the pinnacle of American motorcycles. Some hedge funds quietly reduced their stakes, fearing that the scandal could deepen into a financial spiral. Others speculated that competitors might seize market share, leaving Harley to fight for survival rather than dominance. What had started as oil leaks and broken parts had now become a Wall Street story. Financial journalists began linking Harley's troubles to broader questions about American manufacturing. If an iconic company could stumble so badly, what did that say about the resilience of the industrial sector? The scandal became a proxy for debates over quality, outsourcing, and whether heritage alone could sustain competitiveness in modern markets. And the numbers told a brutal truth. The financial stakes of the twin-cam scandal dwarfed the cost of any mechanical repair. The next phase would no longer be about engines, but about survival in a global market that punishes weakness. Regulators strike. The scandal could no longer be contained within dealerships and courtrooms. Federal regulators, already pressured by growing consumer complaints, began opening investigations into Harley-Davidson's handling of the twin-cam failures. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration demanded data on recalls, warranty claims, and internal memos related to safety concerns. Suddenly, executives who once dismissed engineers now faced subpoenas and hearings. What had been hidden under chrome and marketing spin was being dissected under oath. Politicians seized on the moment, using Harley as a cautionary tale about corporate arrogance and the need for stronger oversight. In hearings, lawmakers compared the twin-cam crisis to infamous automotive cover-ups that had once shaken trust in giants of the car industry. Calls for stricter motorcycle safety standards gained momentum, including proposals for more rigorous testing of new models before they reached consumers. For Harley, the threat was double-edged. Not only did regulators demand accountability for past failures, but they also hinted at new rules that could slow future launches and increase costs across the entire motorcycle sector. What began as a corporate scandal was now being shaped into federal policy. Industry watchdogs noted that if regulators imposed tougher standards, every manufacturer would feel the cost. Smaller firms feared they might not survive the expense of compliance, while larger ones braced for longer development cycles. Harley's scandal, once internal, was now shaping the entire industry's future by raising the regulatory bar. And while regulators sharpened their knives, competitors were already preparing to carve up the market Harley once dominated. Investors flee. The scandal did not only rattle Harley-Davidson, it shook global confidence in the entire motorcycle industry. Institutional investors, once eager to hold shares in established manufacturers, began raising questions about risk exposure. Analysts warned that if Harley, the most iconic name in motorcycles, could falter so badly, then no brand was immune from reputational collapse. Banks and lenders responded by tightening financing terms for Harley. Risk premiums climbed, making it more expensive for the company to raise capital for new projects. Hedge funds began labeling Harley as a watch list stock, noting that scandals of this magnitude often lead to a long shadow of suppressed valuations. Some investment groups even pulled out entirely, citing not just legal and regulatory uncertainty, but also the erosion of consumer trust. The ripple effect extended beyond Harley. Other motorcycle firms suddenly faced tougher questions from investors about quality controls and compliance protocols. Harley had become the cautionary tale in boardrooms and brokerage houses alike. In the world of capital, legends do not earn immunity. They invite scrutiny. Investor conferences became dominated by talk of Harley's woes. Presenters warned that similar blind spots could lurk inside other companies, hidden until scandals erupted. Risk managers urged caution, pushing funds to diversify away from iconic brands once considered unshakable. Harley had become a textbook example of how reputations can implode. And while investors withdrew, riders and workers were left to confront the most personal consequences of all. Ride redefined. For the everyday rider, the fallout of the twin-cam scandal cut far deeper than legal filings or investor reports. Owners saw the resale value of their beloved bikes plummet. Machines once considered heirlooms now carried the stigma of unreliability. Riders spoke of embarrassment when friends pointed out the news, and some stopped riding altogether out of fear that another breakdown could put their lives in danger. Workers inside Harley factories also felt the strain. Rumors of layoffs spread as production slowed. Entire communities built around Harley plants feared economic collapse if the company downsized or shuttered operations. The scandal was no longer just about engines. It was about livelihoods, mortgages, and families who depended on Harley paychecks. The cultural wound was just as deep. For more than 100 years, Harley-Davidson had symbolized American resilience, rebellion, and pride. To many, it was more than a machine. It was part of their identity. Now that identity was in question. Riders who once wore Harley patches like armor were left wondering whether they had been sold not just faulty engines, but a false dream. And so the final question lingers. After this betrayal, can Harley-Davidson ever win back belief? Harley's chrome may still shine, but the trust beneath it is cracked. Share this story so riders know the truth. And remember, every choice on the road matters. Until next time, ride safe, stay sharp, and never settle for silence.